Hello Stampers, this is Yana Smakula for My Favorite Things. Welcome back for another video tutorial. My today's card shows an easy way to color florals using colored cardstock and a fun way to add dimension to your flowers. Instead of stamping my flowers on white paper and coloring them from scratch, I've picked 3 sheets of colored cardstock, all 3 very pale, and they will provide a beautiful background or starting color for my flowers. I'm using a Misty stamping tool and first stamping the flower lightly using Memento Tuxedo Black ink or any other alcohol marker friendly ink. I don't need a perfect impression, just a good enough impression to be able to tell the petals apart. I'll re-stamp this image once my coloring is done with the VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And because I plan to do that, I'm keeping the stamp in the Misty. I'm not removing it. Now the pink is going to be the base color for this flower. I'll add detail using medium and darker pink markers. I'm going to do the flick style coloring and simply flick the color onto the paper. Now coloring on colored cardstock is quite fun, as you can end up having slightly different colors compared to white. Also, you need to remember to let the ink from your marker dry first to be able to see the true color of that marker when coloring on colored cardstock. When you first apply the ink from your marker, you're also wetting the paper, and that alone makes it appear darker. If you don't know what the colors you picked are going to look like on that colored cardstock that you have, you can do a simple test on a scrap piece of paper to see the true colors. Just scribble a little bit of the color onto the paper, wait for a couple of seconds, and you'll see the true color. For the pink flower, I colored it with the RV11, RV13, and RV14 markers. I flicked the colors from the center out into the petals. I did go outside the lines when coloring because I was planning to cut these images right up to the edge, so it didn't matter if my coloring wasn't perfect. Now you can also color these images using other mediums. Perhaps you're into coloring with colored pencils. You can certainly try that here. I also colored the center with the R27 marker. Next, I replaced this image inside my Misty stamping tool, and I re-stamped the black outline using the VersaFine Onyx Black ink. This is my favorite black for very dark black impressions or outlines in this case. Now, these flowers, this stamp set has coordinating dies, but coordinating dies leave a small gap next to the stamped outline. I needed my flowers not to have any gaps, not to have any outlines, so I opted to use scissors and fussy cut them. Now that took care of any coloring that went outside the lines, so you can see how staying inside the lines didn't really matter for this type of project and this type of coloring. I went ahead and I stamped 2 more flowers on colored cardstock. I did that off camera. A yellow flower colored using Y11, Y08, and Y17 markers, and then a peach flower colored using E02, YR00, and R05 markers. I also colored 2 white flowers. I stamped them traditionally on white cardstock and just added shading using a W3 and a W1 markers. Now, the reason I cut these images right up to the edge is because I wanted to place them on colored cardstock background. I also stamped and cut out leaves in the same way. I did not add any shading to the leaves, and I made them plain olive green. Now, I played with an idea of stamping the images directly onto my background and then layering my colored images on top. Looking back at my card now, I wish I hadn't done that. I think the card would have looked better without the background stamping, but it still turned out fine. I mounted the flowers and some of the leaves, creating my floral cluster. Next, I stamped the sentiment. It reads, "With love," and it comes from the Everyday Scripted Greetings stamp set from My Favorite Things. I also used a white pen and I added white dot details around my flowers. I think that this added quite a lot of interest to the background, and it's actually one of my favorite things to do using a white pen. As you can see, I also added the green stems to the flowers and they match to the color of the leaves. Now, don't leave just yet. To add more dimension and to create additional layers for my flowers, I stamped and cut out identical flowers to be able to cut out parts of the flowers, just some petals, and layer them over the main flower. So here I cut out the 2 front petals for the pink flower and I popped them up on the pink poppy using foam adhesive. Now I did the same for the yellow and peach flowers, but to switch things up, I took the inner petals of the peach flower and I colored them yellow. And then I did the same for the yellow flower. I colored them peach. So the inner petals do not match up exactly. Instead, they're slightly different, offering more visual interest to these flowers. I hope you'll give this idea a try. Thanks so much for joining me today. Love you guys, and I'll see you next time.